Hello everyone, I'm here today with Elli Johnson. We're going to talk about the really exciting topic of depression and anxiety. Probably need to clarify right from the beginning, we're talking about like clinical sort of more
not having
serious,
a down day.
Yeah, not just a bad day on a Tuesday. Elli, over the last couple of years, you've written lots of stuff about your own experience of anxiety and depression. That's why I invited you to have a conversation about this. This isn't the first time you've unearthed
it's not the first time I've talked about this.
I experienced my own bout of depression about 8 years ago, and one of the weird things for me was realizing that I actually was depressed and I was anxious and that I actually needed help. So I had a short season where I had to come to terms with the fact that there was actually something wrong with me.
I'm glad it was a short season. Mine was pretty long.
Yeah. So how did that come about for you?
Well, my therapist would say that people experience depression in two ways. So you either like fall off a cliff into depression or it's a really slow, inexorable slide. And I'm definitely the latter. I think probably through my 20s, I was basically pregnant or breastfeeding the whole of my 20s. I had my first child at 24, then 26, then 29. And just gradually life just ceased to be, it's hard. I ceased to enjoy life in the way that I had. And then sporadically I'd have these moments of just paralysing terror, which I later learned were panic attacks. But at the time I just had this is the thing, I had no language for it. I had no context for it. As far as I was aware, I didn't know anybody who suffered with mental illness. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't in the vocab. It wasn't generally, it was only after Ed, my youngest, was born, just around my 30th birthday, the summer before, my husband had very gently been nudging me to go and see somebody because he could tell that I wasn't well. But it was actually only the third time I went to go and see her. I had this moment in the car on the way there where I started thinking, oh wow, I mean, I'm obviously in a bit of a mess, but at least I'm not depressed. I mean, people take antidepressants, like what is wrong with them? Like, they can't even get their shit together, like, seriously? And then, of course, I went to see my therapist, and of course, she said, oh, just was thinking about you after the last time we spoke, and I'm pretty sure you've got postnatal depression, and blah, blah, blah. And then I had to come to terms with it. So it was somebody else confronted me with it. I think if you don't have any context for it, if you don't know anybody who suffered with it, if it's not something that comes up in conversation ever, how do you know you're suffering? You just think everybody else is coping with life, so I should too. You don't have a frame of reference for it.
So you did have a season of just trying to grunt it through?
Oh, 7 years?
7 years.
Well, I mean, it was, it's like everything. It's not constant, is it? Bad patches and good patches. But yeah, I would say throughout my 20s, I probably experienced my first panic attack before I had kids. So I was probably 22, 23. And then, it would go away and I wouldn't have a panic attack for, months. And I'd just think, oh, that was a weird thing. And I'd just, forget about it. And then it would happen again, and I'd chastise myself for being so weak that I couldn't even, I don't know, whatever it was, go out for dinner or cope with the day. And so then I'd just beat myself up some more and tell myself that I needed to just pull myself together and get on with it. And why was this causing me trouble? It doesn't cause anybody else trouble. And then, it escalated until I think when Ed was born, he was an absolute joy, actually. But I just think that one extra thing, I think my husband had probably been just noticing that I was maybe not the woman that he married. Gradually, but he had no frame of reference for it either. Yeah. So, it's amazing, really, that he spotted it. And so, it was only when my therapist mentioned it that I was like, oh. And then you go through the, huge relief. Oh, maybe I'm ill. Maybe it's maybe it's not me. Maybe, everyone else doesn't experience things in the same way, and maybe not everyone else has these weird random terror moments and just feels totally overwhelmed with life. And then you obviously feel huge amounts of shame because you're why me, and then you feel fear, what if it never changes, and just go through that loop for a few months.
I can remember my own experience wrestling with this in the context of the church.
That makes things fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it's not just, we're not just asking scientific questions or emotional questions. All of a sudden we're asking theological questions. And I, for one, I don't know exactly where you sit on this, but I, for one, didn't have good theological answers or responses to my own experiences. You obviously are a churchgoer. Indeed. And wrestled with your own experiences in the context of the church. What do you think what was helpful? What was not helpful about that? Did you wrestle with theological questions in the midst of it?
Well, I mean, if you got all day, it is a massive topic, and you know, I'm still, I think, unpacking it. If I'm honest, I don't feel like. Well, I think this is the difference. I used to think that there was stuff that was like, this is the way things are, and if you're not with that and you're not on board, then you're wrong. So get on board. Whereas now I think I am much more aware of the mystery of my faith, and so I'm happy. Not all the time. Generally, I'm okay with uncertainty and with not knowing the answers. But yeah, I think that my faith. I was thinking about this morning, trying to think of a way to phrase it, and the only way I can really think of describing it is. This is slightly long-winded, I apologise. When I was growing up, I understood my faith in terms, everything was binary. Everything was, you do this and it's good, and you do this and it's not good. So like sin, bad, obedience, good. And that filtered into every part of life. So as a child, it was like, you know, don't hit your sister, don't talk back to your parents, don't, you know, every child has like, don't touch the fire because it's hot. Don't, you know, so it starts with these really basic things that are really good at keeping us safe, and then gradually you become a teenager and it's like, don't drink, don't smoke, don't have sex, don't swear, don't talk back to your parents again, be obedient. And then in my 20s, the list grew, but rather than things to not do, it was things to do. And all this time, all of this was in the context of being a good Christian. So the don't do all those things because they're obviously bad. And some of, you know, and a lot of this stuff like kept me safe, and there's loads of good in all of it. But then in my 20s, it became lots of things to do, like how to be a good friend, how you should pray for people, how you should raise your children, what you should feed your children. It was a
list of expectations.
A list of expectations that ultimately were completely unrealistic. You can't do all those things. But it wasn't that I felt like I was just letting myself down, or letting my husband down, or my kids down, or even my parents down. It was like I was letting God down, which is, you know, pretty. It makes everything rather weighted. And so I think that idea that I had to tick a load of boxes to be a good Christian, I don't even like those words anymore, was incredibly unhelpful, because it just piled on the pressure, and it made me feel like, well, I can't go, I'm not coping actually, because that wasn't, you couldn't do that, because well, that just meant that I was weak, and I didn't have enough faith, and I wasn't praying enough, and all those things. And so even the things that should have been life actually became death, because really I was still a toddler in a grown-up body with a list of do's and don'ts, as opposed to a grown-up person going, oh, hang on a second, what does this all mean? And this doesn't make me feel good, so maybe I should re-examine this. And
so you think your experience of depression forced you to reshape your theology, whether it was explicit or just sort of stuff?
I would probably go further and say that I think that the way that I viewed my faith was one of the major factors in me getting ill. Which feels like quite a difficult and a dangerous thing to say. And I don't say it lightly, I say it after having a lot of thinking about this and a lot of therapy about this. And I would say that the way that I viewed God, myself, expectations of myself were one of the major players, because I felt like there was no way out. And so I was constantly hitting the adrenaline button, keep going, which physically, after a while, your body goes, for real? Like, no, it's not possible to maintain that. And of course, it's very difficult to say that, because that makes it sound like I'm blaming my faith. I actually think that was just the context for me. And actually, it kind of just everyone's just their context that they live in. That's their context, and it can be just as helpful or unhelpful depending on how you process things. And I was processing things in a really unhelpful way, which thankfully I've at least started to figure out how not to do anymore.
Do you think definitely some unhelpful things that came out of the context of faith? Do you think there are things that were that came out of the resources of your faith that helped to? I'm thinking about my own experience of reading lament psalms and realizing the tension that is held in the psalms between ideals and the real experience. You know, there's psalms where people are saying, Lord, break the teeth of those who oppress me. I mean, it really so radical language that is speaking from real pain and real experience. Is there anything like that for you?
Well, I've got to be honest. I don't think when I was first diagnosed and for a while I had the energy or the volition to investigate that. Yeah. So I probably had a good year where I didn't go to church and a lot more time where I went, but it just kind of was there physically. While I just took a step back from all of it because I couldn't separate in my mind the God who expected everything of me with the possibility that might not be. I had this kind of weird experience, I wrote about it on my blog, sometime into not going to church or not maybe, engaging with my faith, not praying, not having quiet times, just binning all that off for a good long time, which I have to say was like, wow, this is amazing. Not feeling, because I never really had a quiet time because I was too overwhelmed, but I felt guilty about it all the time. Whereas now I just like went, wow, I'm not going to bother about the guilt. So after a while of not really engaging with my faith, just kind of resting, to be honest, like let myself off the hook, going, okay, well maybe we'll just live and maybe I'll just try and get better. And then I walked a lot, and I walked often. My husband worked, and obviously I had kids at home still, so when he would come home from work, I'd throw the children at him and go out the door and go for a walk and walk by the river. And I had this really strange experience one day. I don't even remember whether I was thinking it or it's in my head. I kind of just said to God, look, God, I know you're there. Like I don't not believe in you, but I just can't be doing with you because you're way too hard work and life is tricky enough without
It's not you, it's me.
No, it's not me, it's you.
Right.
That's what I was saying. And I was like, I'm really sorry, and maybe one day we'll reconnect, but right now I'm out. Yeah. And I turned around and I walked away from what I thought. This is all happening in my head, obviously. Oh, hello. Hello. And I turned around and I walked away from this should, ought and must God and walked in the opposite direction. And as I walked in the opposite direction, in my mind, I just saw Jesus sitting on the wall going, oh, for goodness sake, it took you long enough. I just had been following this guy who wasn't, it wasn't Jesus, it wasn't God. It was something that I had in my head, this ideal, this, I don't know, this harsh taskmaster who expected masses of me, when actually Jesus was like, oh, yay, you did it, you walked away from that idol that you'd made. And so it wasn't that I was, I said to Matt, my husband, last night, I was looking at some of your questions and I said, oh, look at this question about lament in the Psalms. Gosh, that looks quite heavy and theological, doesn't it? And Matt went, yeah, you should just tell Ryan that actually Tyra Banks in America's Next Top Model got you through your depression. And a lot of truth in that. Yeah. Because there was a lot of watching television when I just couldn't do anything else. Yeah. But just to not be totally negative about my faith, because I'm not at all negative about it, as I walked away from the idea of God that I had created for myself, I feel like I found grace, I suppose. I found grace. And I realised that actually the whole point of faith is a recognition of my faith, is a recognition that I can't do it. And I shouldn't have to, and I don't have to. And actually, if we're following Jesus, then this is a man who hung on a cross. He didn't come with all of his strength and his might and his power. He came broken. And actually that's okay. In fact, I would go as far as to say that's actually really good. Not like depression is good, but living in an awareness of your fragility and your brokenness and living vulnerably in that is a much more honest way to be, and I think potentially a much more powerful. It's one word. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a ramble. But.
No, it's good. Another thing that I'm constantly reading about social media, and lots of people posted questions on Facebook relating to this, but is around stigma. The stigma of living with a mental illness. If you got a broken arm, everybody goes, no big deal. You know, of course you're sick and you're ill and you can't do something, but if you have a mental illness, it can't be seen. It's just not as there's a tension there for people.
Yeah.
What do you think about stigma?
I think
because you've been very public about your journey through your writing.
I wasn't straight away.
Yeah, but
like
recently.
Recently I have. I started the blog about 3.5 years ago, and firstly very tentatively, very nervous putting this stuff out there, because the stigma's real. There's a guy who's written a brilliant book about depression called Matt Haig. It's a memoir called Reasons to Stay Alive, and he wrote something on Twitter the other day. There's lots of things about, it's so brave to talk about your mental health, aren't you brave talking about your mental health? And he was like, it should be ordinary, which it should be ordinary, and yes, it should be ordinary, but actually it still is brave because there is still a stigma. So whilst I totally want to agree with him, it's not that straightforward. I think a lot of it's around education. In one of the first blog posts I wrote, when you write something, it just sort of comes out and you think, oh, that was good. Where did that come from? I just said, ignorance creates a grace deficit. And it does. Not understanding something means that people are unable to be gracious with you, are unable to offer you the support that you need. And because they don't understand, there's a stigma as well attached to it. And I think the other thing about mental illness is, if you've broken your arm, well, it's in the plastic cast and it's going to get better. If you're something wrong with your head, then hang on a sec, is that who you are? Personality and character and all those things, are those things damaged? It's much more complicated. It's an unseen illness. Unseen illnesses are hard to explain or understand, I think. But writing about it has been the best thing ever, actually, because there's a few people who have occasionally written things on my blog like this is a load of nonsense and it's all in your head. I'm like, yes, it is all in my head. And you just need to snap out of it and get on with it. And this is just an excuse for you to blah, blah, blah. And I've never responded to those posts. I don't have to, because 10 other people will go, well, have you read this report? Yeah. What about this? And I feel really backed up. But most people want to say, oh, I thought it was just me. Most people want to know that there's somebody else. There's another me too. And most people who read my blog probably are suffering in some way, or they know somebody who's suffering in some way. So it feels like a bit of a community, and the vulnerability that's necessary to. I'm a massive oversharer. I'm not saying
join the club.
I'm not saying that everybody should write about all of their deepest fears and anxieties and everything else. I've always been a massive oversharer. This is not new. But I think that finding somebody, even if it's only one person, for me, it's everybody on the internet. But even if it's just one person, actually finding somebody who you can be vulnerable with, I think vulnerability is the first point to coming out the other side. Until you can find somebody you can be vulnerable with and find acceptance in it. Acceptance is the key, isn't it? Personal acceptance, going, oh, right, oh, okay, I'm suffering with depression, anxiety, oh, I need to take antidepressants, and grappling with what all that meant. And then the next step is, of course, finding somebody else and then going, it's okay. It's okay. You're a human being and these things happen and we'll find a way through. And